In 2019, during my junior year of college in Colorado, I lived alone in a small off-campus apartment. It wasn't in a bad neighborhood, but it was old creaky floors, thin walls, drafty at night. I never thought much of it. I was used to the sounds. Until they changed. I started hearing faint noises above my bedroom at night, soft thumps, a dragging sound. Once I thought I heard whispering. I told myself it was pipes, or the wind, or the upstairs neighbor. Anything but what my brain whispered. Someone's up there. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to very clear, very slow footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom, heavy enough to be human. I froze. My heart was pounding, and the room felt suddenly cold. I lived alone. Nobody had a key, and the building didn't have interior hallways, just each apartment with its own door. I reached for my phone and slipped into my closet, quietly closing the door behind me. I dialed 911 but didn't press call because the footsteps had stopped right outside the closet. And then I heard humming. A woman's voice. Soft, shaky, almost like she was trying to remember the tune. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like forever. I hit the call button with my thumb and whispered that someone was in my apartment. As I hid there, I listened to the humming fade and footsteps move toward the living room. The dispatcher told me to stay where I was. I remember thinking the police would never get there fast enough, but after about 10 minutes, I heard pounding on my front door and officers yelling. The footsteps didn't run. They didn't hide. I heard nothing. When police entered, I finally came out of the closet shaking. They told me to stay behind them as they cleared the apartment. A woman was standing in the hallway, barefoot, filthy, holding one of my kitchen knives. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. She just stared at us with this empty expression like she wasn't fully there. When they searched the apartment, nobody could figure out how she got in until one of the officers noticed that the drywall panel leading to the attic crawl space had been pushed upward just enough to create a gap. They opened the panel with their flashlight and saw blankets, water bottles, wrappers, and a little pile of belongings that weren't mine. She had been living up there. Later, officers found dozens of photos printed on cheap paper photos of me, some asleep, some cooking, some doing homework, taken through the crack in my bedroom door or from the hallway while I wasn't looking. Police think she had been coming down from the attic at night to eat my food, shower, and wander around my apartment. They also think she'd been watching me sleep. I moved out the next day. I still think about the humming. It wasn't malicious. It almost sounded calm, like she didn't understand she wasn't supposed to be there. But the worst part? Some of the photos were taken only a few feet from my bed.
Okay, I never really post anything on Reddit, mostly just reading, so please excuse me if I do or say anything that isn't common courtesy here. In around 2018/2019, I, 25F at the time was 18/19, was living in Nebraska, where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in NE, but it was still essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich folks started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of that being said, I had a good friend whose parents' house was one of those big ones, right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride 4x4s on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports, and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. Plus, his parents were super cool and we could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun, even though I was quite scared of the dark. So I would just not go outside after a certain time because there was little lighting and the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. I always felt a weird energy driving to or from his place if it was late at night, but never had anything happen until one night. The drive out there was a long, winding two-way road that had thick trees on both sides, and you pass one of the city's largest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, besides the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through this section of road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down listening to music, and it was around 10 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam my brakes on. Right in front of me, in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely pitch-black road with thick forest on both sides, and only my headlights to show what's in front of me. This was a family of three: a tall, slim woman, an average height, a weight man, a child, short hair but couldn't tell the gender based on the clothing and couldn't see their face, maybe around 8 years old, and the mother was pushing a stroller. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered but not nice. They also were not carrying any kind of light source, meaning before I arrived behind them in my car, they had been walking in the pitch black. They were all facing away from me, walking completely silent in the middle of the street the same direction I was heading. I had turned my music down to hear if they were speaking, had music playing, etc. They didn't. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road behind them, obviously, and just sat there for a moment to let them move. They seemed to be completely unaffected by me and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane, or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Before I really had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, they all, at the same time, stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I honestly didn't even give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backwards for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off the road and booking it the other direction. The only thing I remember noticing is that the stroller looked to be completely empty. This was the part that sticks in my mind the most. I've never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Every time I tell this story, I get one of three reactions. They immediately think I'm cuckoo, think I'm lying, or have had something sort of similar happen to them. I really don't care if no one believes me, honestly. It was, and still is, the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I think about it all the time. It was either some weird-ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery, assault, etc., or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself for probably the rest of my life that it was the first option.
I've seen some pretty wild stuff in my life, but most of it is explainable. The one event that comes to mind was witnessed by my dad, brother, and myself, and it's a two-part encounter, but I still consider it one event. It was around 1998. My family and I had just moved into an old clapboard house on the edge of town. It had a huge backyard with a 6-foot wooden privacy fence on one side and a metal chain-link fence about 4.5 feet high around the other 3 sides of the yard. Neighbors on one side, the privacy fence side, a small grass alley that ran behind the back with a street light, and then another yard, etc. Our bedroom was an old converted sunroom on the back of the house that faces the backyard. It had floor-to-ceiling windows all along the back wall looking into the backyard. We didn't have many options as to where to place our beds, so my headboard was against the windows, and my brother's bed was about 8 feet away with his headboard against the opposite wall with the foot of the bed facing the windows. One night we were up pretty late. I was in my bed and he was in his just talking about random things when suddenly he got quiet. I figured he fell asleep, but then I heard him whispering in a shaky breath, so I'm like, "What?" And I hear him whisper again. So again, I'm like, "Speak up, I can't hear you." And he goes, "Don't move and be quiet," in a forced whisper, but I, thinking he's messing with me and like, "Why?" And I'm looking at him, and mind you, my head is to the windows and he's pointing into the backyard behind my bed. So quickly sit up and turn around and see this huge dog head staring almost nose to glass through the window right behind my bed. I'm almost nose to nose with this thing. Just a single pane of glass and about 10 inches of empty air separate me for this thing. Now when I say I screamed, I mean I screamed. Not my proudest moment, but hey, I was like 10 years old. Well anyways, the thing quickly ducked under the window and then ran to the side of the yard and jumped the 4.5-foot chain link fence and bolted off into the darkness. My dad came running into the room with our mom right on his heels. We were able to get out that something was looking through our window. So Dad ran back to his room and grabbed his shotgun and then headed out the side door of the house and into the backyard. Unfortunately, or fortunately IDK, he didn't find anything. Wrote it off as I had a nightmare and my brother wouldn't admit to seeing anything. So I took the blame and was told to quit messing around, go back to bed, typical parent response, etc. Well, later that night, maybe an hour or so, after I begged my parents to let me sleep in the living room because leaving the house wasn't an option and still being refused, I was made to sleep in my room. So again, my brother and I are in our room with these floor-to-ceiling windows. We are just completely rattled. We are both huddled in his bed, staring out the windows, when we see this thing come walking along the chain-link fence on all fours, and the fence only comes up to its mid-shoulder, so this thing is huge. It sniffs the ground, does a few circles, and then hops the fence into the backyard like it's nothing. It walks over to the window and again gets nose to the glass like it's trying to see in. We are panicking the whole time. Well, my brother is like, "Fuck this." And soon as he steps off the bed, we hear this loud bang, and there is a flash of light. The thing at the windows gets knocked sideways, and without even missing a beat, it turns and runs across the full length of backyard, jumps the back chain link fence. It cleared the fence the alleyway, and then landed in the back neighbor's yard. This is easily a 15 to 20-foot jump minimum, clearing their fence like it was nothing, and was gone at a dead run, up beside that house, and off into the darkness on the other side. My dad comes tearing around the side of the house with his shotgun in hand and makes a mad dash for the side door and slams it shut behind him. He is screaming and hollering, "We gotta go." We pack up and head to a hotel that night. My mom absolutely refused to believe we saw what we said. We saw, and we only lived there for about 6 months. It rattled my dad so much he didn't even want to come back. He told my mom that we were just going to move that next day, but she wouldn't allow it. After about 6 months, she conceded, and we moved. Mind you, this is in the coastal plains region of Texas. We have no large wild canines here. We have stray dogs and coyotes, but nothing that would even remotely touch on how big this thing was. My dad swears he shot that thing with a slug from about 15 feet away, with his 12-gauge shotgun right underneath its left arm, hitting it in the ribs where its vital organs are, and nothing, it just ran off. He said the thing that freaked him out the most was that when he saw the thing jump the fence, it walked towards our window, crouched but still on its hind legs. It wasn't walking on all fours, and then when it got to our window, it stood up straighter, and he could tell that while it looked like a dog, its body was shaped wrong. He said it looked like a really stocky person wearing a dog suit, but he could tell it wasn't a suit. Also, that when it was walking in circles sniffing the ground before coming into our yard. The second time, it wasn't actually sniffing the ground, like for a scent. It was staring at our window with its face to the ground, like it was acting like it was sniffing the ground, almost as if it was playing a part to see if anyone would notice it. He said he's had dogs his whole life, and everything about what it was doing was wrong. A while later, I asked my dad why he was in the backyard, if he thought I was having a nightmare, and he told me my brother is the one that gave it away. He said with how panicked I looked that my brother was almost white as a sheet and wouldn't take his eyes off the window. He said, "Your brother has never looked so scared and never been one with just making stuff up." So after going back to his room with my mom as he was laying there thinking about it, he decided that if my brother was a white as he was, then we had to have seen something. So he grabbed his gun in case he had to scare some creeper out of our yard and figured he was going to go through the garage and out by the far side of the house and sneak to the corner to see if someone was peeking in our windows or if someone was actually messing with us. He never actually thought we saw a huge dog-looking thing, just that maybe with it being dark outside and us being kids with overactive imaginations, maybe we just mistook someone as something. But when he saw that thing come up the side fence, and with the street light in the back alley lighting up the backyard, he saw it, and it freaked him out. He was going to creep back inside until it went up to our window, and he said as it stood up, he just got this instant feeling of just dread, like something was going to happen to us.